Welcome. I'm James Shore, and this is the Art of Agile Development Book Club. Today, we're discussing situational awareness, and I'm very happy to have Jason Yip joining us today. Jason Yip is a Staff Agile Coach at Spotify and formerly a principal consultant at ThoughtWorks. He specializes in applying Agile and Lean thinking, principles, and practices to the development of software teams and organizations. He's the author of the popular article, "It's Not Just Standing Up, Patterns for Daily Standup Meetings," which can be found on martinfowler.com. Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to get things started by reading an excerpt from the Art of Agile Development. As a reminder, this second edition is out now in both ebook and print editions, and you can get it from Amazon by visiting jamesshore.com/s/buy-AOAD2. And you can find excerpts and bonus material by visiting jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2. Stand-up meetings. We coordinate to complete our work. I have a special antipathy for status meetings. You know the type. A manager reads a list of tasks and asks about each one in turn. They seem to last forever, although my part is usually only 5 minutes. I learn something new in perhaps 10 of the other minutes. The remaining 45 minutes are pure waste. Organizations have a good reason for holding status meetings. People need to know what's going on. But Agile teams have more effective mechanisms. Informative workspaces for status and the daily stand-up meeting for coordination. Cargo cult. Sit down, stand up. It's 10:03 a.m. and your team is once again clustered around your stand-up meeting room, waiting for the previous occupants to clear out. Remind me why we need this room again? Stevie asks. All the other ones were booked, Vicente replies. He's your scrum master. And we need the projector. Look, they're getting up. 5 minutes later, you're all comfortably seated and Vicente has the issue tracking tool projected on the wall. Okay, let's do our stand-up, Vicente says, leaning back in his chair. Justine? Justine looks up from her phone. Oh, yeah, yesterday I was working on story 1106. Today I'm still working on it, no blockers. Great, Vicente replies. Adriana? Still working on 1109, no blockers. Vicente continues around the room, making a few updates in the tool as people speak in the same vein. Okay, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Remember to update your story status so we don't have to do it in the meeting. See you tomorrow. It's 10:20. As you head back to your desk, you reflect on the stand-up. It's fast, at least, but so useless. Other than Vicente updating everyone's status in the tool, it feels like a waste. What's missing? So that is the stand-up meetings practice from the Art of Agile Development. A good introduction into our topic today, which is situational awareness. Let's go ahead and get started with our first discussion prompt. So what does situational awareness within a team mean to you? And what does that look like when it's at its best?
Sure. I wanted to think about this almost like what's the feel of it. So if you're in that situation, what you sense, and then talk about maybe a little bit about why, like what that implies, what that means. There's something I think when situational awareness is strong, how I would describe it, there's not a lot of hesitation. So it's not like you don't get stuck where you're trying to do something and all of a sudden you stop because you're not sure or you don't know what's going on. I might even call that confusion. And I don't want to say that you shouldn't ever stop, because sometimes the actual collective situation is unknown and then you're slowing down to understand what's going on. But when there's this, let's call it similar to the words you're saying, it's uncoordinated hesitation, where it's just a signal that information flow is choking, it's stuttering. So then that's like where you have a situational awareness problem. People know things that other people don't know that they need to know, and then you get these hiccups starting appearing in various ways.
Mm-hmm. You know, that reminds me of a metaphor that people used when they were talking about pair programming back in the early XP days. I don't remember who came up with this metaphor, but I loved it. He said it's like the difference between shooting hoops on a basketball court, where you're by yourself, you shoot the basketball and then you have to run after it, versus when you're pairing, you shoot the ball and then the other person catches it and throws it back to you. So you're just constantly going. It sounds like that's what you're talking about with that smooth, coordinated flow.
Exactly. Right. So, and it's like that smooth coordinated flow with and the kind of the basketball metaphor helps. Like it's where there's a more than one person involved. This kind of flow thing is not about what's happening in each individual's head per se. It's more this kind of collective brain thing that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, question for the rest of you: have you been involved in a team that had good situational awareness or poor situational awareness, and what did that look like in your experience? Again, just raise your hand in Zoom to participate in the conversation. And Harold has a comment. Harold, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I really liked this little story and what Jason just said, and it helped me think about this. And there's this kind of feeling when you've got that situational awareness and shared that if there's like a buzz, you can feel this buzz in the room, in the space, in the workspace, and that there's not a lot of impediments in the communications. And there hasn't been a history of that impediment. And it's just much more pleasant and enjoyable to work in that kind of environment. One thing I think I'll bring in is the work of Jim McCarthy around this, because I really like what he talks about in reducing the head gap. And I think of the conductivity of metal when it's like, or superconductors. When you get to that place where there's like a zero head gap, it's maybe unapproachable. I mean, it might not be something you can achieve, but the closer you get to that, it's just it's hard to actually express how much better it is. It's so much better.
Yeah, it really is. And I think for those who haven't experienced it, I think it's really hard to really appreciate. I mean, we're talking in very vague terms here, right? We're saying it feels smooth. Yeah. It feels like things just flow. But what does that look like in practice?
Just to comment on that, there's a phrase that I learned. This is coming from martial arts space. Like we talk about how do you describe salt to someone who's never tasted salt? Which is like it sounds like, oh, salt is very salty. And there's a little bit of that here. Like I think there's something of, even though that's the case, I would agree that's the case. There is something, if you think about your experiences, when it's slightly better and slightly worse in terms of awareness of situation. It doesn't necessarily describe that last jump where it's almost like a phase shift that happens. It doesn't describe that, but I think most people can at least understand like when it's better or worse. And then you kind of do have to feel that phase shift to really describe it. It's really hard to, you can't put it in words.
Guthlauger, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, has some thoughts.
Thoughts on situational awareness. What comes to my mind is mostly technical, as I work primarily as a programmer. So I imagine like it's not only about communication and like talking together, but being aware of like what code is in place, what features are there, where to find documentation, what prerequisites for the feature you're working on are ready, what is still to be done. And that comes to good technical organization, I guess. Well-organized code, readable code, understandable design, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on that, Jason? How does the technical side fit into this?
I think what you're describing here is because like there's different aspects to this. I think something of like it's almost like what creates a hiccup here, because there's different things that will create a hiccup in a team. Like some of it is knowing what other people are doing so that you kind of move together type thing. There are some things about understanding your landscape tooling, like which is the technology, like, hey, how are things there so that when you're engaging, making contact with the stuff you're modifying, and it's not just software, like it could be outside of software if I'm doing something else, how well do I understand the machine that I'm modifying? Because that itself can cause hiccup. And there's also I was just in a session that I was helping facilitate yesterday and the day before of the problem space. So like, let's say even if I was clear about how the code worked. I knew where all the what we've done and what we intended and all this. I like touching the code, no friction there. If I can still create hesitation when I go, I don't understand the problem well enough. So you still get that stutter type thing. Like if you say, hey, situational awareness is not just inward facing, if you will. There's this thing of, I guess people use this metaphor of the, do you feel connected with the wave kind of thing? So which is the problem space, which can be very dynamic. And that kind of awareness is also part of it.
This still seems a bit hand wavy. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, sort of to approach it from a different direction, which is when you the first time you were on a team that had the situational awareness, what were they doing? What were they concretely doing that sort of helped you feel that awareness?
Some of this, like I usually describe this as in general about intermediation. So having things in the way. So let's say from the perspective, if I say this team has awareness of the problem, that they're not passing through people to be exposed to it. Like, I want to understand the business problem. I'm talking directly or observing directly the problem rather than passing through a person. If I'm trying to understand the code, I'm not asking someone, I'm looking directly at it with someone who knows it. If I want to know, like if we want to know what each other are doing, we're engaging, either working directly together or talking directly together. We're not asking a manager who asks another manager type thing. Like all of those things, like I generally say all the intermediation things go away. Like if we kind of back to this idea of the stand-up is like I usually, even though I wrote a lot about stand-ups, I don't really talk about them that so much anymore. Like this general idea of this as a mechanism to try to reduce the alternative ways that you might have done it. Like if instead of saying, hey, we just go around in a circle and just tell each other what we're doing, that we're asking someone else who asks someone else to get that, which is sort of like the underlying problem you're trying to address. And I don't know if this is still kind of hand wavy because I'm trying to get a little more concrete here, but just that general pattern of more direct engagement with whatever you're trying to know.
Mm-hmm. Which I think relates the idea in Agile of the whole team, where we have everybody with the skills we need on the team, so you can speak to them directly rather than having to pass through intermediaries like you're talking about. Skip has a comment. Skip, welcome to the show.
Let me just ask whether this set of observations is consistent with the situational awareness you're discussing. When a team is layering ideas, when we're facing a challenge and one person says something, oh, and this, and yeah, but what about? And I'm hearing that from multiple different people in the room. And at the same time, I'm seeing nonverbal signs of congruence, that they are, yeah, they're nodding or, ooh, good point. Little interjections that are occurring like that. I've been in situations like that. Is that close to what you're discussing?
Yeah, like I think it's like that. It highlights two things, I think. One, yes, it shows like how fast that new idea is spreading within that group, right? So like we just learned something and now we all learn it kind of thing. There's like you're reducing that delay. It also highlights the point, like it's not a static thing, right? That there's new information coming in. There are either internal, as in a person within that team learned something, which then spreads very quickly, or some external thing happens, like market change or some other external force happens. And then again, it spreads very quickly. And the reason why I was talking about before of it's not just, I guess I already just said it. It's just not just the internal stuff. Like it's not just, hey, stand up is the team knows what everyone is doing. Like that's not enough to say that you know what's going on. There's also things that are happening outside that boundary. How does that come in, and then make sure that your perspective is as good as you can get it, if let's say.
Thanks for your comment, Skip. Again, if you'd like to participate in the conversation, just raise your hand in Zoom. And I'd like to welcome Dan up. Dan, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Wanted to offer a couple examples of maybe tasting this alt. I've seen that it can be hard to create within a company. But a lot of people may have experienced through team sports or playing music, or maybe working high school, like working a small restaurant where people were working together. Some of the attributes that come up for me is more like more body language and visual communication. So things are happening in the team and someone's reacting to that, but a request doesn't need to be made. It doesn't need to be called out explicitly. And similar to Skip mentioned, some layering and the yes and this momentum or growth. But a lot of that responsiveness to each other. And as Jason mentioned, even to outside things happening. The team seems to notice that and start changing without a lot of communication around what just occurred.
Yeah. I'd say that that's certainly my experience on the teams with high situational awareness, particularly within the team. I think the point you're making, Jason, is that there's internal to the team situational awareness, and then there's external to the team situational awareness. And I think you can have one without having the other. But within the team, that sense of people communicate without having to directly say, "Can you please do this?" is something that I see. What about you, Jason? Does that match your experience?
Yes. Like, I'm not sure this answers your question, but like, what occurred to me is like kind of like using the metaphor of continuous integration. So here, this is an integration problem. But the integration, what we're integrating here, and you could say the same thing when it's code. It's like integration of awareness. Like I know something, you don't know that thing, or our team doesn't know that thing. How fast or how frequent and how fast does that integration occur? And just like when I'm talking about the inside outside thing, it's like, how much do you need to integrate with broader stuff? And sometimes you can decouple things, but let's say this, and back to this idea of the stand-up is I go, hey, what's a stand-up? It's like a more regular integration of awareness type technique. It's not continuous though. Mm-hmm. It's not continuous, which is why people would say, hey, if I'm mobbing or ensemble or whatever you want to call it, that's more continuous. And you go, okay, that's why you can say, oh, that gives you maybe a stronger effect there. And I'd almost say like, that's how you want to think about it. It is like when we talk about continuous integration, but now we're talking about the human side of it, not just even though the code side of it also is a human side of it, but almost like the purely human knowledge side of integration. These are the sort of things we're talking about here.
That makes a lot of sense to me. That point you made about the stand-up being an integration point, but it's not a continuous process. Yeah. And this actually raises a question I wanted to ask you, which is what role does the stand-up play in situational awareness? Both in terms of contributing to it, but also detracting from it. What do you see?
I think like that's why I kind of thought the analogy works, right? Is if you have a continuous mechanism, that might actually just be better, right? So you don't get the gap growth as quickly. It's a little bit more efficient because it gets smoother, etc. There are some cases though, like especially if you look at an organization on a larger scale and not just single team. There are reasons, even with code, the same thing. There are reasons why you may not integrate stuff all the time. Like you'll create a public API boundary and then you do this thing because you just don't want a couple. And with an organization, you see the same things. You could say, hey, maybe if I'm continuous at the team level, cool, right? But then I might do like a less continuous, maybe still frequent, but not regular, but not necessarily continuous integration with some broader boundary. I could see that. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is like, how do you think about this? Like the problem you're trying to solve is this integration thing, but you don't always have to integrate everything all the time for various reasons.
Yeah. I find it interesting that you're talking about how mobbing, for example, means that you're integrating more frequently. I've certainly noticed myself is that some teams use stand-ups kind of as a crutch because they don't have good communication. They don't have good situational awareness. And they sort of pile everything into the stand-up and then don't communicate really at all the rest of the day. And their stand-ups are usually not very effective. And I've never tried this, but I've wondered if removing the stand-up and saying, hey, you need to figure out another way to coordinate, if that would help. Have you ever tried anything like that? Have you seen the phenomenon I'm talking about?
My reflex, James, is that you're optimistic.
I think I am. Yeah.
Because it can go either way. One, the pressure's there, and then they rise up to the occasion. That's a possibility. Sometimes people just don't. They don't rise to the occasion. So, and I can't say like it depends on each team. Like, at least even if that was done, I'd be very explicit about saying, "Oh no, let's try this out." And for the thing of not having the crutch and being very clear about that, it's kind of tough. Like especially these days, like one thing I've noticed is people are tired, generally fatigued because of pandemic and things like that. So sometimes things that are, hey, that's a nice little learning exercise, but their brain capacity is not there to do it. So having some kind of a scaffolding mechanism to try to encourage that sometimes helps more than the sink or like effectively you're kind of describing a little bit of a sink or swim approach, which can work, but it can also not work badly.
Yeah, I mean there's a reason I've never done this, because when I think about the teams that I'd want to do this with, the reason I want to do it is because they don't communicate well, and just saying, go communicate is not going to be super helpful for them. Again, if you'd like to participate in the conversation, just raise your hand on Zoom. I'd like to invite Jordan up. Jordan, welcome.
Yeah, hello. I'm really curious about your thoughts on the value and/or importance of off-topic conversations in stand-up. So this has been a balancing act that I found on my team, and I don't know that we have, or one of the teams I'm currently working with, and I don't know if we've solved it. But with going to fully 100% remote from a on-site location, as just about every team has, right? We obviously really, and actually our team formed, even though we worked together, our team formed or kind of carved out from several other teams. It became a team during the pandemic, so we only know fully remote. And what stand-up has evolved into is very much a mix of, it can take 45 minutes or more, and we do get through a lot of the same things, but then there's a lot of just oh, this cool TV show, how's your garden doing, that kind of stuff. And there's this constant tug and pull of, on one hand, that's really valuable because ultimately it's the only time in the day, despite many efforts at having other full team things, but there was option, right? Like, hey, coffee hour, whatever. And of course, you don't want to make those things mandatory. And so you never really get the same participation that you do in stand-up. And so, I'm very hesitant to slap down that. But at the same time, there's this dichotomy of some people on the team are like, yeah, but I want to have a normal stand-up and I want to get through this in like 10 minutes. And so finding that balance, and ultimately the team likes each other. And it works really well. And we've started to develop a really good culture. And I would say the number one thing for that has actually been letting those off-topic conversations happen. So I'm just curious about the how you feel that balance and that dichotomy, that tug and pull, and techniques on managing that.
Yeah, I definitely flipped my thoughts on this after the pandemic. Previously, I would be like, let's be efficient, get the point across. We're on this mission. Like there's the awareness of what's going on and then we're going kind of thing. That would be my kind of default thing. But I'm sure everyone's seen this. Like if you're paying attention, you go, whoa, like the stuff that I go, socializing, whatever, like it's just went off a cliff. And then you go, oh, okay. Now I'm like, no, you got to kind of read the thing and then, ease in and then take a little bit more time if necessary, because I don't know if people are noticing. I was noticing random problems showing up because everyone was so stressed, just random. Like things that would have just been no big deal when we were kind of together just became problems. And so now I'm kind of going, no, take the time you need, like get to know each other, be even very explicit about that. Like, and this is not situational awareness anymore. It is situational awareness of being aware of what's happening to people like psychologically under stress. And then letting people connect it's like a different goal, but it is, I think I don't know because I haven't really experienced all remote outside of pandemic conditions. So I can't tell you that, hey, this is how to do it. Because we have this kind of background stressor happening at the same time. So I go, is it just like a normal remote thing? I can't tell. But like right now, my reflex is yeah, take the time to connect. That's something I think you got to do. But to even talk about it, like it's not like an accidental thing. It's a very deliberate thing. I joke sometimes where I'm going, scheduled small talk is over. Like I just say, hey, here's the thing, and then bam. Because I think people kind of remember me back before this, where I'm like, hey, just let's go and like get to the point and then do this thing. So then you kind of play with that balance, but it's something worth discussing. But definitely the socialization need is a real thing. Like I was seeing observable effects of that breaking down, which you need to deal with.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's actually thanks very much, Jordan. This ties into the next topic I wanted to bring up, which is that in a remote environment, it does seem much harder to get that situational awareness. When I was first doing XP, the way I learned about situational awareness and really got good at it was doing the XP practices of having everybody in the room, doing pairing, and you'd hear the conversations happening. And if somebody was talking to somebody from outside the team, we'd physically bring them into the team room and we'd talk to them, or we'd go to their location. But as much as possible, we'd do stuff in the team room. And so there was just this osmotic communication that happened. You'd overhear stuff, and you'd also have that socialization. The question that I want to ask, and I'm going to just put that out there for you all to think about, what do remote teams do? What can remote teams do to really improve their situational awareness, since they can't be in this team room overhearing conversations all the time? I'm gonna let you think about that for a second, Jason. Mike has a comment. So Mike, welcome.
So I was just thinking in terms of situational awareness and the daily meeting and all these things really work together. And you can't ignore the fact that we assign specific things to people often. And it's sort of like, hey, I have my thing to do. Do I even care about what's happening with other people, or with, do I even care about situational awareness? So much of that comes from, hey, what are we asking people to do? And what are we asking them about? So that it even matters to them to pay attention. And of course, I hate the 3-question stand-up, would much rather talk about whatever the work is. And above that, would rather mob or encourage as much pairing as possible. And I'm interested to hear what people have to say about your last question, James, on how the whole remote thing works and all that. So, yeah. But anyway, just thoughts around the system nature of, where does situational awareness fit into the rest of the system, and how do our activities there or our policies there enhance or inhibit situational awareness for people on teams?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And there was a lot of conversation on the Discord. And just for those of you who don't know, every week before the book club, the live book club session, when there's a extended conversation on the Discord, which is you can find at jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 Discord. And there was a lot of conversation on the Discord this week about those sort of systemic things and what leads to situational awareness and what organizations do to create or sort of hinder situational awareness. Thanks for that comment, Mike. So I guess I'll open it up to give you the chance to address that however you like, Jason. Systems, the remote aspects, which these all sort of tie together. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, like a lot of this, I think that a lot of this comes down to which even like, I think when we initially talked about this, like what's the important part here is understanding why you're doing the thing. And then you have different expressions of doing that thing. And this is kind of next level up. So, hey, why do we talk about stand-ups for, say, situational awareness? And then there are different aspects to it. And then you have to talk about coordination as well. But then you go, hey, one level up. Like, this is almost saying this is like a fundamental assumption that sometimes we don't remember Agile space. We don't remember to talk about it because it's almost like a default assumption. So you just go, oh, what are you talking about? What do you mean gravity? Gravity works. Like, why do we mention it? And one thing that's kind of gravity is that we're in it together. This kind of assumption that we have this shared goal, that we're all kind of stacked up on it, is I would say almost a default assumption. So I think people keep forgetting that maybe that doesn't hold in everything, and you actually have to work on it. But like that's I kind of noticed this, like sometimes people talk about like what Spotify does and stuff like this, and some things are just not talked about because that assumption is there. And I think it's generally even for extreme programming, agile people, we just kind of assume that's the case. But that's where you can get this breakdown. Like none of this stuff works if you go, I don't really care what other people are doing, and I don't really care that we're trying to do something collectively. I'm just doing my thing. Then none of this, like it's almost impossible for any technique to work. It's just almost impossible. There are things we can do to try to, like there's some aspect of just creating visibility of the bigger purpose, creating visibility of why it makes more sense, like it's more valuable to be working together on something than working independently. But yeah, at the end of it, if that belief, that assumption isn't there, everything will break down.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up because I think it is a default assumption when a lot of people talk about agile stuff, but it's not the default for a lot of the organizations I see. On any side of the organization, I see a lot of contributors who are called individual contributors. I see a lot of programmers and other team members who think their job is to churn out tickets. And I see managers who think their job is to assign tickets to individuals. And that is exactly the opposite of we're all in this together and we're working on this as a team. I apologize for getting your name wrong. I'm going to invite Guthlager to come back up. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to comment on your question on what kind of replaces or not replaces, but helps with the osmotic communication and the continuous learning in a remote environment. And I believe the answer, or one aspect of the answer to that is basically the open source model, pull requests and code reviews. And I guess it goes back to the original XP motivation for pair programming. If code reviewing is good, why not turn dial to 11? So I guess code reviews and pull requests are like dialed to 8 or 9. Mm. But I guess that code reviews are definitely part of the answer here.
Yeah, thank you. What's your thought on that, Jason?
I guess there's different levels to this. Like within a team, I don't know if this is controversial these days. I haven't coded for a while, so I'm just gonna be controversial because I don't have to deal with it. But like I don't like pull requests at a team level. I think it's slow. And like I just noticed a lot of delays there. Like people always, I don't care what company you're in, you're gonna be complaining about it takes so long for someone to review my PR. That's like I hear that all the time. And like back in the day, that just doesn't happen because you'd be pairing and there's no delay there. And like I mentioned before I didn't mention this, but part of this kind of continuous integration of awareness thing is the speed. It's not just the distance. The distance is almost like a mechanism that deals with the speed. How fast does this concept get out there and then turn into a collective concept? And I kind of see this here. Like it takes too long. And like, because here, this is kind of back to actual continuous integration with PRs type stuff. But you can think about the same thing. Like, what is the mechanism that you have to make sure, hey, I have this idea, I have this concept, I have this knowledge. What's a mechanism to ensure that it spreads? And there are faster and slower mechanisms. I remember someone mentioned something about documentation thing, which is kind of necessary. You got to leave a trail because of the asynchronous aspect, but also to recognize that the time aspect of that. Like I do this thing, I'm aware of something, I create something, there's a delay and someone picks it up, versus mechanisms where I know something and it gets to the other person faster.
Right.
What's happened with remote is we're kind of we have certain constraints where I can only compress that time too much or so much, but you still always want to be thinking like, how do I compress that time? How do I deal with this thing? Because the delay creates something that I would not describe as sort of like the ideal of what we want.
So how do you get that fast sort of not just quick continuous integration of ideas, but the fast feedback. How do you get that in a remote team? What techniques do you use?
This is where I get into triage. So this is a thing I learned. This is from Mars, the people who do chocolate bars and stuff. Private company. Weird that you can learn something from them, but hey, they're kind of interesting. One thing they talk about is actually team topologies talk about this. The idea that collaboration as a concept is not a universal good. It has a cost to it. There's a trade-off, but it is very good for certain things. Primarily this idea of very fast back and forth kind of integration of knowledge. And I think with this remote thing, all remote, you have to make a triage priority call about what activities, what situations where you say, I want that very rapid integration of knowledge. And for this other stuff, I'm okay with it being less frequent. So I was thinking this, it's almost like where am I cohesive and where am I decoupled? It's a similar thought, but now you're thinking about from an organizational perspective. And I go, there are certain things, like if I'm trying to work out a broader strategy, broader kind of design thing that is kind of more sophisticated, and I want very rapid back and forth perspective resolution type thing, then I go, yeah, that's not just I'm going to write a doc and do it. I'm going to go real time. Do whatever do, fly people over if you can. That stuff, do that real time. And then when it's like, okay, there's going to be a distance now, but I'm willing to eat that. Then I go, okay, maybe that convert to docs, and then maybe it's a more asynchronous type approach, and I'm okay with that. But then it's designed such that it's kind of like an API call over a protocol type thing. I'm okay with that. I'm okay that it's delayed. It's no big deal. And it's being very deliberate about that to say where. I guess what I would also say, because of the pandemic, that collaboration time is a scarce resource now and is highly valuable, and you need to target it.
Sort of like you were saying, or maybe it was somebody else, but you really only get that everybody together once per day during the stand-up. So use that time for the socialization, because people do start to drift apart and lose synchronization. I wonder, for coaches and managers out there, what are some things that they can do to help improve the situational awareness on their teams? And one of the things you just mentioned was the flying. And I wonder how much I was working with a company recently, and they had just had their first in-person internal conference since the pandemic started. And the thing that struck me was how happy everybody was to be there and how excited they were to actually see each other and like socialize and get to know each other personally. So what other ideas do you have for how coaches and managers can help their teams gel and form this really good understanding of what's going on?
Yeah, I guess there's a different layers, like because you mentioned the social capital stuff, which now you very deliberately do, and it's not like I wouldn't say it's not like a touchy-feely thing. Like it's almost kind of shocking how you see an observable shift in performance type thing that happens, and you go, okay, be very deliberate about this. Like, I've heard people talk about every quarter, like getting together for a week kind of thing, like where like that's the kind of investment you want to do, because the difference in interaction is so significant. Which you didn't notice until you just shut it off. And then it's like, what just happened here? That's just from the social capital side. There are also some things, which I guess it's almost like non-traditional, because normally I wouldn't, back in the day when we were co-located, I would just never say this. I'm going, have someone come and talk to every so often. We don't need to do that. But now it's like, because you can't read someone's mind and they're not co-located, you need to leave a trail. Like, you have to write things down or do something that leaves a trail. Now, I'm kind of, maybe I'm just old, so I like reading things rather than watching a video. So I usually say, hey, write it down. Some people prefer video or something, but you specifically for broader context stuff, like, hey, here's product strategy, here's broader business thing, to actually do that, which then allows people to, because those things don't necessarily change that often. Like, it's just this kind of broader umbrella. So you just be clear about that. You don't need a lot of back and forth per se, maybe initially when we're determining it, but later on, it doesn't actually modify that much. So that's there. And then it creates this umbrella to allow us to interact. What I've noticed a lot is if that kind of pattern where organizations, they don't do that. It's almost like they are assuming that somehow, even though it went away, that people were overhearing about these larger context stuff, which just went away, and then they're not leaving anything to compensate for that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if I could summarize, because I've seen exactly the phenomenon you're talking about. When companies were in person, there was a certain amount of communication flow that happened to the organization entirely accidentally, in that people would have conversations and would sort of flow through. I was working with a company recently. They were, of course, fully remote because of the pandemic, and they weren't really doing a great job of writing things down and communicating. And so there's just this confusion all the time about how things work. You can't just talk to this group and assume that that's going to flow throughout the organization. Our time has just flown by. I see people have their hands up, but unfortunately, we are out of time. So, Jason, thank you very much for joining us and talking about situational awareness today.
Thank you very much.
Jason Yip is a staff agile coach at Spotify and author of the popular article, It's Not Just Standing Up, Patterns for Daily Stand-Up Meetings. Next week, we are discussing DevOps and building software for operation. Jessica Kerr will be our special guest. She is a software developer, speaker, and semathicist who focuses on maximizing the flow of learning in systems. That is going to be on May 13th at 8 a.m. Pacific. The Discord conversation will be starting today. You can join the Discord by visiting jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 Discord. That is sure to be a really interesting conversation, so don't miss it. That is everything for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. It's been a great conversation. Jason, thank you once again for being our guest today, and I will see you all next time.